Okay, so this is August 20th, 2025. I'm Gary Berg Cross, one of the co-chairs of Semantic Harmonization for ESIP. And we have a small group of people here, Kate Rose, Nancy, and Mark Parsons, and Aaron from ESIP here. And we're going to be talking about the current topic of whether there are tools that can help us with some of the things involved in mapping semantic resources, uh, improving ontologies and definitions and things of that nature. We've had a briefing by John Graybeal uh, in the past, and we may have other briefings from um, people like Chris Mungo, who are doing some relevant work within the Odbo Foundry, mostly at the GitHub level of sort of making things work. But what I wanted to share with you, I'll share my slides here, is something that I've tried, just a very obvious thing of trying to use some GenAI chatbots to see what they know about particular domains that have been modeled by ontologies and have representative vocabularies, because we've been trying to improve those and map between them for allowing more data interoperability. And so what I've played around with is what's called fine-tuning prompts to get at what it knows and what suggestions it can offer to us to improve particular domain ontologies. I've mostly worked with Envo here for an obvious reason. That's what we have been doing in part of this cluster. So this slide just gives you a general idea about some of the thoughts about it, looking at completeness and correction, overall structures in particular. So so here is a slide that is a portion of what I presented last time after John Graybeal's talk. And I was working on mapping between Envo and Suite, looking at a list that we had, and trying to see if the GenAI, I was using Copilot at the time, still am, could sort of give us some ideas about candidates and how these terms might and definitions might differ and how to bring them together. And so I talked a little bit about that last time, and some of that's in the notes that you can go to the link for last time. Among the things that I found interesting, and by the way, if you have a question that's focused enough, we can stop here, but I expect we might have time for a more general discussion after I finish the 9th or 10th slide here, and you have a overall idea of what is going on. So among the things it did is to take a look at related concepts in the mapping and offering us some ideas of how they differed. And so you see here, for example, just one example of a dozen or more that it generated just with one prompt on this, and looking at how these things map, how they're different. We have Envo and Suite, and without me asking, it also offered up relevant other ontological definitions that seem to be. So it came from land cover ontology and came up with something. So this again is a bit of a help, treating this GenAI sort of as a little bit of an assistant that I can keep asking questions, seeing what limits to its knowledge are, seeing what I agree and don't agree with. So here's a new take that I can go through with a series of slides. It's part of a paper that I've been writing and working on over the last month or two based on the Ontology Summit that I'm involved in that we had this year, which dealt with improved real-world semantics, and the role of explanations and justifications, which sort of connects to what Gen AIs are giving you. They're giving you attempts at explanations. When we look at the very rich semantic side of what semanticists are working on, how does it compare to the type of things we get out of a Gen AI? I'm sort of just looking at that in this paper. And so here's a starting point. So I started with an ontology design pattern that's very general, which is the material transformation pattern. And it consists of about 6 or 7 classes that are generally involved in material transformations. I then tried to look and ask it about how that maps to Envo. ENVO does indeed have a material transformation process, but it's both more and less than what you find in the ontology design pattern. It's more in terms of depth. It's less in terms of systematically covering all the elements that might be involved. Like in ENVO, it's more interested in the outputs of a transformation, like this thing turned into water, it melted. It's less interested in the process to some degree, and the subtypes of process and the inputs. So here is the list of when you look at, this is from ENVO itself, what are the subtypes? You'll notice there are pluses here. So there are lots of little subtypes for some of these things. What I asked is, this is a long list, is there another conceptualization that's sort of missing in here? How would you sort of group these things together? I just asked it without giving it any more thoughts about it. And it indeed came up with what seemed to be one, it actually had two ideas, but here's the one that we pursued more. It said, well, some of them are mechanistic, some are contextual, and some are systematic role dimensions. And here, then it said, here's how I would organize these and group these. So it took the things that you saw on the previous slide, this list, and it organizes them in here. And I have some things that are underlined partially to say, oh, it also came up with terms that weren't in that list. Of interest, for example, is distillation, which is not on the list. So there's more that can be done about breaking down these new subcategories of phase change, thermal processes, chemical separation, the aerosol area, and the solid state geological. These seem to have some value for an ENVO ontology, and maybe others like KEBI because of the chemical separation aspect of it. So what I have below, and by the way, am I going too fast? Does this make sense up to this point of what I'm trying to do? Anybody? Does it make sense?
It makes sense. Can I ask like a really quick question though?
Yeah.
So you're asking Copilot to, just because I have not played with this at all, but like when you're asking it to sort of assess the different like resources, ENVO and whatever, do you just kind of say, use this resource, and you give them like the URL for, I guess for the
I
ENVO
don't have to give
resource?
it a URL.
You just say ENVO and it just
I
kind of goes
started
out?
by saying, what do you know about ENVO's categories? Do you know about the
Okay.
material transformation
Okay.
ontology design pattern? And it says, yeah, I know this, I know this. So so essentially that's the first step. It's like going
Okay.
to
Thank you.
Wikipedia and saying, what can you tell me about this? It says it
Okay.
knows something. Then I start to focus in on what it knows. And I ask questions as if it's a domain expert.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So I asked it, for example, since distillation was one of the things that wasn't directly in ENVO, even in, I don't think it was in Chebby, rather. I asked it, why was it included in this mechanistic classification? He says it meets this criteria of a material transformation in ENVO. This is actually quoting it, what it says here. Here's the justification. It's a phase change. Liquid to vapor to liquid, back to liquid, distillation. Goes on a part of it. It also adds more information about it, as you see here, that it's thermally driven, heating, cooling, and so forth. Let me go to the next slide, because there was more information that I could fit on one slide. So I'm continuing just what it's saying down here, and I've got most of what it's saying here. Just to give you an idea about the types of things it does without just being asked a question about justify what you said. Why did you come up with this concept in phase change? It tells me it's related to thermal processes due to heat application. It gives me additional analysis there I didn't ask for. It says why it's important. It says it's especially relevant in ENVOs when modeling anthropogenic transformations of natural resources or pollutants. That's underlined again, anthropogenic, because I didn't ask that, but it came up with an alternative classification. Because I could classify these material changes in other ways. Some of them are anthropogenic, caused by humans, and there's a whole other track you can go on. It's giving you openings for asking more things, but I'll go on from here. It can also recommend the ontological structures and write axioms in OWL for changes to an ontology like ENVO. So here's what it says in simple language. I do have a slide in which it actually writes the OWL, and it also writes how you could submit this to the group managing ENVO. This is what you use as a justification. It filled that out for me to do this and many other changes. So it does a lot. Now there, obviously when we have semantic harmonization sessions, we disagree sometimes, and there are points of contention. And again, that gets to be something that we ask each other about. And then we say, well, this is the best solution. Of course, if I submitted these to ENVO, there would be humans looking, domain experts looking at this, and ENVO experts looking at this to judge whether it's worthy or not. So we would that's a possible other step to test this out. So I asked it more about what it knew or what it thought. You got to use that expression. It was proposing some new things for ENVO, like distillation, but it came up with a whole group of them for phase changes. And here are some of them, along with the justification for it. And again, I asked it what are new concepts in this classification.
So where is it getting this from?
Well, when I ask it a source, it'll actually send me the publications on it. Sometimes it's other ontologies, like you saw before in the beginning when I was up here, when it came with the land cover ontology. And here's a reference. It came up with something saying, well, I'm doing this because they should fit into a physical chemical process class. Like boiling and freezing are both types of material transformation, and it described them as a physical chemical process. Well, I pointed out, I asked them, well, there's no physical chemical class in ENVO, right? So how do you explain what you came up with? Well, it says it could explain it in terms of references, and the references down here. It is commonly used in environmental science to describe transformations governed by physical laws, phase changes, which was our starting point, and chemical interactions, the combination. Dissolution is offered as an example, oxidation. It's a convenient umbrella in interdisciplinary discourse. In other words, it would help probably with interoperability. It gives me a reference on that type of thing. So I could ask it to actually fill out a request to add this to ENVO based on what it is doing here. So I'm almost done here. Indeed, I am done with the main slides. I can just show you this quick slide about its adding OWL for some of its proposals, a small part of the proposals, and it's also helping me fill out a submission. It defines things, it tells what the parent class is, it tells what properties are involved, it also relates it to other things, it's related terms, defines the domain and range, and so forth. So all in all, it's like having a pretty nice assistant for some of these things. So with that, let me stop and see what people think, what questions are, where we might go from here.